Welcome. I'm here with Solveig coming from Kingston, Ontario, to talk about her story of electromagnetic sensitivity, what she went through in school, her accommodations, and where she's going next, and how she has recovered. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Really, amazing to have this platform. Well, in the beginning, how I became sensitive, it started when I was in grade 8. I would go to school fine, and when I entered the building, I would feel foggy, like I just couldn't think properly, fatigued, like the life was just being drained out of me, and nauseous too. I would throw up most mornings, and I would have this incredible like itchiness, like I'd have to dig my nails in my skin to just distract me. It was unbearable. And by noon, my face looked like I had fallen face first in a patch of poison ivy, and I need to call my mom in tears to pick me up. And the scariest part of this all was I didn't know what was causing these reactions. So I knew we knew it was at school. I would go to school and experience these reactions, like these nightmarish reactions, really. But I would get better at home. So we were trying to connect the dots, really.
How did you figure out what was contributing to your symptoms?
Well, we started going to my doctor when this happened, and I was also taking time off school to try and remove myself from this environment that was clearly making my body sick. And my doctor, because I had been experiencing these rashes continually, and my skin was becoming so raw and vulnerable that it eventually got infected. So she looked at the infection and prescribed me with antibiotics. But we knew the problem was, of these reactions causing this infection. So she referred us to an allergist and a dermatologist. I went to the allergist, and all my tests came back negative. I wasn't allergic to any chemicals, any food, anything like that. And then when I went to the dermatologist, which was my worst experience by far, because I went there at a time when I wasn't immediately experiencing a reaction, she couldn't exactly see the rash on my skin. And even though we showed her pictures, she just said, "I'm going to prescribe you with birth control," because she thought I had acne, when we all know acne does not come and go when you go to school. And so we were at a dead end, really. And we kind of turned to the internet just to try and figure out how to get generally healthier. I cut sugar and changed my diet so I could just try and get healthier, really, and boost my immune system. But my reactions were still there, so we were still on the road to figuring it out. And it wasn't until we really tried to think of what had changed in my school environment to set off these reactions. And my mom asked me, like, did anything change in your class? That it made me think, like, oh, when I started experiencing these reactions, it was the day my teacher moved my seat from the farthest place from the router in the school to the closest, to the point where my head was, like a couple feet from the Wi-Fi router. And that was the day when my body just like exploded with these symptoms. And at the time, my mom was doing some research on EHS, but she knew the effects to be mostly behavioral. So we didn't really connect the dots at first, but we still wanted to, test it out. And so we asked my teacher the next day to move my seat back to the farthest place from the router, the very opposite side of the classroom. And that day, I didn't have to throw up. I didn't experience the insane itchiness. It actually, I could tolerate the day as opposed to having to flee the environment, essentially. And that's when we started to sort of put two and two together, that this was like the only thing possibly that could be setting off these reactions. It was the Wi-Fi.
Wow. So did you try to confirm it? What other steps did you take related to?
So of course we wanted, we wanted this to be concrete, and we started to pursue trying to get a diagnosis, which only one person or a couple people in Canada can diagnose EHS. So we asked our doctor to refer us to Dr. Rena Bray at the Women's College Hospital, and it was a 1 year's waiting list to get in and see her. She's one of the only people that can diagnose EHS. So we waited, a period of 1 year, it's now 3 years, for anyone trying to, get in to get a diagnosis or see her. And I waited a year and I finally got my diagnosis of EHS. And so that was, was concrete then. But we were sure for a long time. Like, I even remember an incident where I left my phone on beside me when I was sleeping. And the next morning I woke up and my face just looked like completely sunburned. It was so red, irritated. And it was things like that. Like, even in our home environment, although it was relatively low in exposure and Wi-Fi, we took out our microwave and our and like all of our Wi-Fi and everything, and turned off our phones to make it a real safe place. But things like that, like, to help me get better at school.
How was your life affected when you started having these symptoms and realized that it was the wireless, cell phones, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth?
Yeah. Well, it really changed things at home. We had to really all make changes as a family. Like, I changed my diet, like I said, and we changed our environment by removing all this stuff. I remember there was a period of time where I would get $1 every time my dad left his phone on in the house. That was a steady income for a while. So it was definitely a learning curve for everybody, right? But like, in terms of my school life, every day I went to school, I would just get sicker. And throughout really, like, grade 9 for me, I wasn't necessarily ignoring my symptoms, but I would go to school, get sick, go home, and try and get better, really just to get sick again. And so it was just a cycle, and my body wasn't healing properly. So eventually I had to leave school, and I lost connections with my friends. I wasn't able to interact with my peers or my teachers anymore. I really lost my school life, and I had to start learning from home in an unconventional way, because both of my parents work full-time jobs, and they couldn't homeschool me, right? So I started learning the things I wanted to learn, but I was definitely learning in isolation. I was quarantining before it was a thing, I'd like to say. For 2.5 years, that was my life at home, just focusing on my health, trying to get better, doing things like exercising, paying attention to my diet. I think people don't really realize that when you're sick and when you have an environmental illness, it really is a full-time job just to, like, survive and maintain a state of health that can allow you to function. And so that was really the main focus of my life, trying to avoid a reaction and protect myself, really, which seemed impossible at some points in my life. We live close to a cell tower, so even though I was out of my school environment, which was definitely the worst because every room has a router, every person has a phone, it really is the most dangerous environment for a person with EHS. So although my home was relatively safe, we lived close to a cell tower, and that began to sort of affect things in my home a little. Like, I had to move to the basement eventually because my old bedroom, was adjacent to the wall of the cell tower. And so there started to be more and more exposure in there as they boosted the nearby cell tower to my house. And I actually had to sleep in my living room for a period of time because, we just had to figure things out, which it led us to purchase like technology like meters so we could measure this, because you really have no idea what your exposure is till you can measure it and actually see the numbers. And so that's what we had to do.
So you had to move into the basement because of a nearby cell antenna. And here we have 5G coming, where there's going to be millions worldwide new
Yeah.
cell towers and cell antennas in front of our homes and neighborhoods.
Yes, that was really scary for me at the time. I mean, it still is, but yeah, picturing, like, my world was already so small. It was my home, and had 5G rolled out sooner, or had they just pushed on, and had it been in my neighborhood or community, I would have had to move out of my city. And it is really scary. Like, I was already an environmental refugee that would completely displace me. And yeah, I would have experienced so much ill health effects from that. That's a nightmare to someone with EHS, and can really honestly mean life or death.
How about telling us about the things that you lost, the relationships, the
Mm.
what what did you lose
Yeah.
and what did you gain?
Well, yeah, like I said, I lost my school life really, and well, now I'm able to work on getting a portion of that back, but I lost credit accumulation, so I won't be leaving high school with my high school diploma, which can sometimes affect your life in the future. But I'm trying all I can not to. And relationships too, friendships definitely started to fade away. The less and less, you can be in school and see your friends, and the less you can honestly like text them, which is now how everyone communicates. All things like I couldn't do, and even people close to me, um, they had their own assumptions. They thought people thought I was mentally ill, that I had anxiety, that I was just too lazy to go to school. Which, I mean, if you know me, I love school. It really is. I've always been an academic person, and I've just loved interacting with teachers and like in a school environment, being in a school environment. So, um, and having people tell you too that you're not trying hard enough to like go to school and stuff like that was definitely hard to hear, because you can imagine you're working so hard on your health, you're fighting all you can really to try and get back in that environment, and people are telling you like, no, you're not trying hard enough. And yeah, and so yeah, for 2 years of my life, 2.5, I was at home and isolated. And I can look at my time away from school as a loss, but I do look at it a gain in a way, because I got to dive into things that I wouldn't necessarily learn in school. Like I dove into my piano studies. I went from about a grade 4-ish to a grade 10 where I'm at now. And um, I dove into studying like nutrition and food and how to get healthy in that. And so I have a really deep understanding about that. And yeah, it led me on to so many things that I think have really changed the course of my future for the better, I think, because I'm so confident in who I am now and what I want to do. I have that sort of clear in my mind.
What ended up happening in the school? Were you able to get any accommodations in
Yes,
school, in
yeah.
libraries and so forth?
So it was an uphill battle for a long time. And definitely the most work goes into trying to educate people and just really trying to understand the condition itself. What is EHS, and what's needed for a person to have a safe environment who has EHS. And so, yeah, for a long time, we were trying to get my school to accommodate me, which they eventually did. Really thanks to my parents really fighting for me. And yeah, I'm thankful for the accommodations that I got, but I was always reminded when we were going through that process, um, which is not for the weary of heart, I tell you.
I'm
Um,
sure.
yeah, I wasn't only doing this for me, I was doing it for people who are going to have EHS, and who have EHS, who are going to need these accommodations, and need a safe and school environment, because they don't have the resources, kind of like I did, to learn from home. And yeah, they don't have that to fall back on. Which, I mean, I didn't really. I was kind of doing it unconventionally and making it up as I kind of went along. Not to say that I wasn't structured. I learned very quickly that I had to schedule every day and stick to it, be structured, and I know what it takes to be self motivated. But yeah, people will need these accommodations in the future, and I'm glad that we made so much progress, so people can run off that and use it.
Can you list the accommodations that you got, like
Yes,
just like a checklist of things that
yeah.
that happened?
So we had all the routers in the school turned down for me, like the volume turned down, if that makes sense, to like 15%, I think, or 20. And then in my immediate area that I was in the school, all the routers were turned off. So my classroom, but including some of the classrooms around me. We also had signage put up around the school, all around the school, to remind people to turn their phones off. And then when they were around the area that I was in, that this was a Wi-Fi dead zone and to not have phones in that. And yeah, I'm really thankful for the teachers that I had because they were very understanding and accommodating and, tried their best. And another accommodation was people would put their phones away in my class in a metal box, like a Faraday cage, right? We used a cookie tin, and that was every day. Like when people came into the classroom, they would just immediately put their phone in the box. But it was a lot of things. Like I had a meter, so I could check, that the levels were safe for me. But there were days where it was a lot of like something's on, trial and error. You have to make people understand that. Oh, it's not just your phones, it's your smartwatch, it's your AirPods now. Like there's been so much technology and just appearing in the past couple of years that wasn't there when I first became sensitive. And so there's always more doohickeys and, people have all the bells and whistles now. And so, yeah, so at times it kind of felt like I had to give everybody a Wi-Fi brush down, but yeah.
A Wi-Fi brush down, right?
Yeah.
Like where you're just peeling things off of people, like the watch, the this, like I know.
But I definitely enjoyed the classes that I was able to take in school so much, especially English. That was something that was besides reading, it's hard to do from home because it's so much discussion. And thankfully, like my friends and my peers around me were very understanding and empathetic and tried what they could. Like I was so touched a few times. Like my whole class would drop everything and try and make my environment safe for me. And I mean, of course, there's always people who don't like it and don't want to be inconvenienced by not having their phones right beside them. But for the most part, when you're at school, you're there to learn, and technology kind of hinders that most of the time.
How did this affect your relationships with people and your friends?
Um, Thankfully my friends were pretty supportive, but it's a matter of fact of I was just not able to really reach out to them. Like I didn't have a phone, I couldn't really text them, and so it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. I because um I was always pretty sick, like when I was at school, but even when I was away from school, it's pretty hard not to experience reactions and avoid this radiation completely. So I would usually have to spend all my spare time getting better. And I mean, I was happy when I was at home that I could focus on that, but I definitely sort of connections start to become distance and they start to slip away because I just had to focus on getting better. And it's hard. I couldn't go anywhere really. Like I couldn't go to the movies or the mall with my friends. I couldn't go shopping every weekend, and I couldn't even really go over to the house most of the times because um, they had Wi-Fi and cordless phones. And again, like it was just for me being in any environment besides my home was like almost impossible. I couldn't even go to my grandparents' house, not because they had Wi-Fi or technology that was wireless, but because their neighbors did. So yeah, your world really becomes so small when you have EHS, I think. Yeah.
What do you want for other teenagers and young adults to know and to do?
Yeah. Well, I definitely would see so many people when I was at school and had EHS um, with similar symptoms to me. Many of my friends would complain, "Oh, I have like headaches all day," or when I get to school, I feel nauseous. And I would see people walking down the halls with rashes or red blotchy patches like in the shape of their phones, like where they hold their phones near to their head. And all that stuff is just not normal, right? Like I think people need to stop ignoring it and realize that like this is connected to like these devices and stuff. So we definitely need to spread awareness, break the stigma. EHS is a condition, and it definitely exists. People have it. Like I know 5 people just in my small neighborhood who have it, and it's not, people who have it aren't aliens, essentially. Yeah. So there's that, and um, people or who think they might have these symptoms, make your home a safe environment, make it a sanctuary, really, especially when you sleep. I think that's so important. When you sleep, your body produces melatonin, but when you have wireless devices around and Wi-Fi, that suppresses your melatonin production, which is so key for our bodies to recover when we sleep and to produce antioxidants and all that stuff. It's essential to our body's function, and Wi-Fi hinders that. So, never wearing your technology on you, and never and like getting rid of technology that you don't need, really. We need to move away from it, I think, all the time. Just completely detox your environment of it, as well as bigger issues like we need to call on Health Canada and our communities, really, to wake up, and especially like in Health Canada's case, update the science, because it is extremely out of date. In the US, people think there's research and safety standards, but really, I mean, there's tons of research, non-industry funded research, right? All proving that this is harmful to us, not just for people who are sensitive, but long-term. We're looking at, long-term effects like cancer and infertility. And calling on them to update their safety standards, because the US, they're still operating on safety standards that only affect this, like the burning of the flesh or tissue, heating of the tissue, so all the biological effects that I experienced, there's just no safety standards on, which is completely unacceptable, because that's what's happening. People are reacting to this on a biological level. And so doctors need to become more aware of this, because I pretty much received zero help from the mainstream, like Western medicine world. I had to go to like sort of alternative, like a naturopath and that, to receive any help, but it's something that doctors need to be increasingly aware of. And yeah. He's a bit of a chubby guy, but he just wants
that's
to sleep on my
great.
bed.
What's your cat's name?
This is Maisie, or long. His full name is Mazer, because we got him at a corn maze. But yeah, this is him, and he'll be sleeping on my bed for the rest of this interview. Okay, there we go.
What do you hope will happen from telling your story and doing the awareness raising that you're working on now?
I really hope people will be able to connect the dots in their life, and if they're experiencing anything on, like I've explained, like headaches every day and nausea and skin rashes and stuff, realize that it could be connected to their Wi-Fi exposure. And also to, give hope to the people who are suffering from EHS out there. I could have had it way worse. I know people who are more sensitive than I ever was, and who have become homeless because they don't have the support from their families, which just breaks my heart, because when people have EHS, they're unable to do so many things, like so many basic things that we take for granted, like just getting groceries. And is like, a mountain to climb every day for someone with EHS. I know people have become homeless because of this. We need, as a community, to pull together and make our community a safe place for these people who are suffering, because they're the canaries in the coal mine, right? And you wouldn't say to someone who has asthma and people are smoking around them that, oh, it's just the person with asthma's problem. It's not society's problem. It's just the people who are being affected. No, this is, as a society, as a community, we need to change, and we need to wake up. And I really hope to spread the message that when someone is telling you how they feel and what they're experiencing and what they think what they think is causing it, to, instead of just completely disregarding them and dismissing them, to just listen and believe them and take their word at face value, because when someone's losing their health, they don't have much else to lose. And all they need at the end of the day is someone to listen and try and understand them.
In talking about how this issue is comparable to tobacco and cigarette smoking, what have you learned about that as you've researched this as an 18-year-old who's, I guess for years now, since middle school, if I'm
Yeah.
correct? How do you see the comparison from your perspective?
Um, it's very similar. It's parallel really to what we went through with like big tobacco and companies like that. I think for sure in the future, Wi-Fi and wireless technology is going to be like smoking, because it is not only harmful to people with EHS and who are sensitive, but to everyone, long-term health effects. And so there's definitely, the in the case of big tobacco and smoking corporations and companies, um, for a long time the science that all people listened to was industry funded, and so we need to look at peer-reviewed science, which there's so much out there, and it is all telling us the same thing, that this technology is not good for any of us, whether you are sensitive or not. And we need to break the stigma, because when you start talking about it, people don't want to hear that. I think people know that screen time and there's things like cyberbullying and so much harmful stuff that we can access through the internet, but they don't always connect the dots, and they don't always see the part that physically and on a biological level, this is harming us also. So the effects go deeper than just psychological.
The United States and Canada really need to catch up to what several European countries are doing, removing Wi-Fi, certainly from kindergartens, from elementary schools, restricting the exposure in schools, having campaigns like in Cyprus, they have educational campaigns so parents know that they can reduce, one, that it's even a thing because it's invisible. So it's very easy to ignore, but
Yeah,
educating parents about it so they can reduce exposure to their children. Um, what what do you think are the most important things for parents to know
yeah.
as they
Well,
learn about this issue?
well, children's health is on an extreme decline. Um, there's so much more chronic illness and stuff. And if you suspect that your child is experiencing these ill effects, even just even if you don't think that, as a using the precautionary principle, we always want to try and make our environments a safe place, don't we? Especially when it comes to our children's sake, because we don't fully know how this is going to affect them in the future and what it means for their lives. And things like cancer and infertility, we don't want them to have. We always need to protect our children, and again, that's part of the reason why I was fighting for accommodations. I know kids in my neighborhood who have EHS, and we need to make the future a safe place for them. And yeah, not only do kids have tons of chronic disease, but like anxiety, ADHD, and like all things like that.
Are the public schools accommodating students who are sensitive, or is it just the private schools? And are there schools where they remove the Wi-Fi?
Well, in my area, my public school accommodated me, but there are private schools too that have also taken out Wi-Fi and stuff like that, and decreased the level of radiation. And so schools are absolutely liable. They need to reassess putting all this technology in. Like you said earlier, schools are corporations and playground, and so we need children shouldn't be guinea pigs. We can't put this technology in, especially when it has zero pre-market safety testing. And yeah, we need to focus on making it a safe place for them. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I had a quick question since you seem you're in your bedroom. Could you
Yeah.
just show us how your bedroom is a sleep sanctuary and describe, really it's about what's there, but also what's not there?
Yeah. So I have I don't have a phone or anything like that in my room, and we have no Wi-Fi in the house. And of course, I'm using internet to speak to you right now. And instead, I'll just show you. Instead, I'm using Ethernet, which is so much more reliable. And not only that, it's good for the environment. A wired connection is so much more efficient in terms of energy than wireless. You're using like it's using 100 to 1,000 times more energy to have a wireless connection. And so I just plug in really simply just to my Ethernet, which most homes should have. And I don't have a cordless deck phone in my room either. All our phones in the house are corded. And so we'll really only have one. Yeah, like that, right? And so we have one. And when I hear it ring upstairs, I have to do a little run, but we get our exercise that way. And yeah, so I think where you sleep is so important. And especially, when I was sensitive, having a good sleep versus not a good sleep in a safe environment made a huge difference. My body could not handle anything emitting in my environment when I was sleeping. In fact, I would react 10 times worse when I was sleeping than when I was awake. And so it's really important, especially for kids and young minds and developing minds, to have a safe sleeping environment where they can recover every night.
No cell phone by the bed, no Alexa or smart
Yeah.
speaker that does
Yeah,
things.
no wireless speakers or anything. Any device in my house comes with a cord. And so even, my computer, I shut it down. It's in the corner of my room, or sometimes it's upstairs in the office. But we really limit our technology in our house. We don't even have a microwave because those also, I mean, it's called a microwave because it operates on microwave radiation. That's how it warms up your food. And so it's a very similar signal to like Wi-Fi. And so we removed that. And I think people think, you don't have to live under a rock or in a cave when you get rid of this stuff. There's a safe way to use this technology. And I'm by no means anti-technology. I think it's helpful. We can do things like this, but there's a safe way to use it. And it's not the most popular way to use it nowadays, but it is more beneficial for you and the environment,
Yeah.
which we all need to be, more kind to our environment.
We swapped our microwave for a toaster oven
Yeah,
and we heat things up. There is some pre-planning that needs to happen. You can't
yeah,
zap something quickly, but it was easy. And the way I was really shocked when I took my meter and measured what was leaking from our microwave oven, I was aghast. And it
yeah.
goes like 30 feet. I mean, it's not even, now it is a different, it's the same frequency, but a different kind of signal because it's
Hmm.
not carrying information, of course, than
Yeah,
even Wi-Fi, which is actually more biologically active
yeah.
in its
More pulsating.
modulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the pulsations from a
Hmm.
data carrying signal compared to a
Yeah.
microwave oven.
And yeah, and when I was sensitive, that's what I would feel. Like not only like did I get rashes, right? But at the beginning I had that itchiness, which toned down to like when I was reacting, I could usually sort of tell I was reacting because I would feel this prickling, this kind of almost burning sensation on my skin. Like I would describe it like a million ants running over my skin. That's how I felt
Mm,
it. And it was that pulsating. I could actually feel my skin pulsating. And so,
wow.
yeah, it wasn't, yeah, definitely like if I had a high enough exposure, I could start to feel it over time. And I would go home, look in the mirror, and like there would be a rash. And so, yeah, it's, and I think on the meters too, some of them you can hear it, you can hear the frequency. And it's such an awful sound. And I think when people hear that, they become a little more empathetic because to everyone else, it's something completely invisible, right? And you're feeling it, you're being affected by it, but no one can begin to understand what that's like. And so when they hear it, they can kind of picture what you must be feeling as a person who's sensitive, who is feeling that signal, which sounds like a machine gun, really.
What message do you have for corporations? What do you want
Um,
corporations to do?
um, Man, if this was to all corporations all over the world, um, the greed is not worth it. Like all this, like the money and stuff. And it is going to affect generations after generations of people. This radiation, it harms us on and alters our DNA really, and on a biological level, the effects will be irreparable. Infertility, how can you come back from that? Cancer. Um, really, people are dying because of this, and corporations need to be held accountable. They really don't have any liability. They don't have any obligation to operate um, morally, and they don't even try. They need to be held accountable, and we people, us as a community, um, we can't be so willing to trust them. We need to question things, and um, but they need to be held accountable. And even in the fine print when you get your phone, like in the manual, it says you should not have this technology close to your body, but it's in the fine print. Nobody reads the fine print. They know that. um, they need to be transparent and honest. And um, yeah, like here's an example. When I was sensitive and I was trying to make my home a safe environment, we moved houses and we needed to get a new Wi-Fi router. And so we went to Bell, and we needed a wired connection, not a wireless router, which is hard to get nowadays. So I forget exactly which model of router we have, but we asked them, okay, are you going to be able to turn the Wi-Fi off on this, because we can't have the Wi-Fi in our house? And they said, oh yeah, like
No
we'll turn it
problem.
off for you, no problem. um, well, like that whole month after, I was reacting worse than I had ever been at home. And I would sit at my dining table, which is right across, like right in the line of where the router was. And I almost couldn't eat dinner. I was like, oh my gosh, I just feel so terrible here. I don't know what it is. And I would stay in my room most of the time. And my mom's like, why don't you come out of your room? And my room was the farthest from the router. And I was like, I don't know, I just feel better here. Well, turns out when this pushed us to purchase our first meter, and we realized, oh no, this is still on. And it's just um, the Wi-Fi that they disabled. They didn't actually turn the signal off. Like all of
Right.
the signal was definitely there, but you were disabled from connecting to it, like on your phone. So it didn't show up, but the signal was still emitting. And I'm thinking, well, why do they need that? Like if you're just going to turn it off, turn it off. And so we called them and said, like, my dad, my mom and dad, like our daughter is experiencing like ill health effects from your router. And um like, you need to fix this, you need to turn this off. Like we as your clients expected this to be turned off, and you pretty much lied to us. And they're so, like, technicians and everything, they're so unaware of what this technology actually is and how it works, because it's a new thing every 5 minutes. And eventually we got it turned off and had a wired connection with no anything else emitting from the router. But now we get a 10% discount on all of our Bell in the future. Like, yeah. So because my mom and dad put it on the internet, like, this is what's going on. Like,
Wow.
we were just so shocked. And you almost feel like violated when something like that happens, like in your home, right? Like, you're
Well,
thinking your
we've
home
had
is a
that happen. I mean, I've spent hours. I'm definitely one of the experts in the field of how to make your home safer with, these first steps. And I have spent so many hours helping family members, my parents, to figure out how to turn off the antennas, because like you said, they say it's off, but it's not off. You have to
mm,
measure it. It turned out that one router that we had from Comcast had six other antennas in it that weren't turned off. The four antennas weren't turned off when we turned off the two, which were the Wi-Fi. And we just couldn't figure it out. And we had to go through this whole process. And that's just ridiculous. We shouldn't have to go through
no.
all of these We shouldn't be the FBI to just
I
turn
know.
the radiation off of the devices that are in our home. I mean, we should have
Transparency, right?
choices with what
Yeah.
we want in our home and have it easy, like flip a switch.
Yeah. As the consumer, we should be
Yeah.
given all the facts. And that's not how most corporations act, unfortunately. And for a long time, like if you look at, smoking, they completely, manipulated the media, through advertising and things like that. And for a long time, things like that were enough to not make people question it. But like events like that in our home, like what happened with the Wi-Fi router and just my condition in itself, inspired my dad to become a building biologist so he can help people assess their home environments and like any environment that they need to mitigate and to make safer and rid it of all this wireless technology that they can't always detect and they don't always know what's affecting them, and so he helps them with that. Well, I was injured by an extreme exposure to Wi-Fi, and it became an immediate threat in my environment, and I had to completely give up my life from school really and try and get accommodations so I could get my school life back. And thankfully I was able to do that, but there's so much that needs to be changed. Not everyone has 2.5 years to spend on getting accommodations, and people just don't have that time. That's like half of your school life really, and so we need to break the stigma. I keep saying that, but it
Yeah.
needs to happen. And the taboo, people don't like hearing it, but they're going to have to hear it a lot more in the future. And we need to shift our focus on the next generation, because they're being born into this world that is completely full of Wi-Fi. Our exposure versus 10 years ago on this radiation is not like 10 times, not 100, it's a quintillion times more radiation than it was 10 years ago. That's a one with 18 zeros behind it. And that is just insane. Like that's not natural. And so we need to change our environments, our living environments, our school environments. Schools need to be a safe place. That is where children spend, that is really where a lot of us spend most of our time. Um, you think it's like, yeah, it's like almost 20 years of your life, really, that you're at school. And and during that time, you do so much important developing of the brain, of the body, of emotions, really. And we're seeing things like behavioral problems, chronic disease are all like are all shooting up the charts, and we need to make schools a safer environment. I think
Yes.
that's what needs to happen, because if that's a safe place, learning is going to be so much more effective. It's going to be a much more productive environment. It can really only benefit us, and yeah, I think this technology, it does more harm than good. That's really the bottom line. And although, people, it's convenient, um, in the long run, it won't be. How convenient is cancer in the future and infertility? Because that's what we're looking at. And I think people think it's progress because they can always connect faster. They can watch video games, with a better connection and faster. And um, that's progress at the expense of the decline of not only our health as a community, but our environments. And that's a price that we can't afford to pay. We can't have um, a sick Earth and a sick population. That's beneficial to nobody. So it's not progress. It's quite the opposite, in fact. It's not progress when you're looking at, severe health effects in the future. That, yeah, when you're losing your health, you really feel like you're moving backwards. And, you know, I think the rest of the population is ready to steamroll ahead with everything new that comes out that's wireless. But to people who are sensitive, you just feel like you're being pushed and pushed farther back. and you feel out of people's minds, but we need to be conscious of people who have EHS, who are essentially our canaries in the coal mine, who are suffering at the expense of this technology that we think is so necessary and convenient when it's not.